दिल की जो तुमने कही चैन से रहने न दिया जब चली सर्द हवा मैंने तुझे याद किया इसका रोना ही नहीं क्यों किया दिल बर्बाद इसका गम है कि बहुत देर में बर्बाद किया हमको किसके गम ने मारा ये कहानी फिर से ही हमको किसके गम ने मारा ये कहानी फिर से ही किसने तोड़ा दिल हमारा Great. So we are live on YouTube. We are live on LinkedIn. And I've sent people messages on WhatsApp. So we should be good to go. If you can hear me, if you can see me and hear me, say something. And we will be good to go. We will be good to go, folks. We will have the show that we deserve. The show that we deserve. The show that makes everything worth it. The show of all shows. The show that sets us up in the morning and helps us develop the skill of predicting the future. Right? If you can hear me and see me, let me know. I can see people joining in on LinkedIn and on YouTube. That's cool. Let me check myself on YouTube. People joining. That's good. That's good. Let me check myself on LinkedIn. The show that. Yeah, it's good. I think it's good. Let us begin. The show that we deserve. The show that we deserve. Bum bum bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum bum bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Good evening. I'm sorry. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thinker's Frequency. We are having such a good time. This is the peak of human civilization. We are working so hard, doing such good work for ourselves, our parents, our kids, our siblings, our husbands, our wives, our friends, everybody. Well, not other people's husbands and wives, I hope. And just when we thought things couldn't get any better, like they couldn't possibly get any better, they just did. Call it divine intervention, folks, but things just got a whole lot better. Now we have Thinker's Frequency, our weekly mental workout, a weekly dose of insights and analysis that don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. So let's continue with our journey of reading between the lines, things that are especially interesting and important in the world of business and finance. Let's go. Oh, but before we go, You gotta follow a tradition, right? You know the tradition. You know the sweet and sacred tradition of the simultaneous sip. We'll all sip something together, and it'll bring us good luck, as it always does, without fail. And all you need for the simultaneous sip is a cup or mug, a glass, a tank, a chalice, a stein, a canteen jug, a flask, or a vessel of any kind. Pour it with your favorite liquid. I like some hot water with black pepper in it. But today I've got something special. In addition to the black pepper, I have some clove, some cinnamon. It's a very exotic drink I've got today. And here we go. Beautiful. Beautiful. Let's do it again. Delicious. You know what the simultaneous sip says, right? You know what it says? It says that you're not alone. It says that we're in this together, which is such a beautiful thing to say. With that out of the way, let's begin. Mr. Nishant Mittal says, "Good morning, showman." Am I a showman? That's nice to hear. So let's begin. A lot of things happened last week. A lot of things, crazy things happened last week, right? It was just the world fell apart, came back again, fell apart, and came back again, and it happened 10 times, right? Uh, Firstly, let's look at the global economy. Uh, if you look at what happened with silver, right, it's just extraordinary. From its highs, silver has fallen 50%, right? About 40%, not 50%, but 40%. And that is extraordinary. We always said at Thinkers Frequency that silver is extremely volatile. This is not the first time silver has fallen, by the way. You know it. Viewers of Thinkers Frequency know it. Silver in the past has fallen 70% from its highs, right? And it has happened yet again. So this is crazy. This is not expected. A lot of questions are unanswered about silver's sudden fall from grace, right? There is still shortage of physical silver. However, the ETFs and all, they had a lot of shorts, the big US banks, and somehow those shorts got liquidated, right? And then it came back and then it got liquidated again. So it was just very, very weird. There's news that Shanghai, the miners, in the Chinese play, they're refusing to sell at the prices currently, you know, working out in the market. So it's very, very weird. Comex, while the silver was falling, the circuit breaker didn't work, right? There were problems in the exchanges and so on and so forth. So it's very murky. All the details are very murky. But silver has proved to be extremely volatile, which shouldn't be surprising to us because we always said that silver was very volatile. However, in the last episode of Thinkers Frequency, I had said that silver is extremely volatile, so you never know where it goes. But it shouldn't go anywhere because the utilitarian aspect of silver and the demand for the product as such is not going anywhere, right? And that particular reading still remains. It still exists. It's still pretty solid where it was. So the situation is to be seen on how silver bounces back from here, or if it does at all. Gold, in the meanwhile, has fallen a bit, but it's still month on month. If you look at the last month, it's still up 8 to 9%. So if something is up 8 to 9% in the last month itself, we cannot say much about it. However, from its highs, gold has definitely fallen. I'm checking the GLD, 495 to 441. That's about over 12% from its highs. SLV, on the other hand, 40% from its highs. So gold retains its position. SLV is down 15% and from the month it's down 3%. Silver, essentially, right? So that's what's going on. Still not bottomed out, hasn't topped, hasn't bottomed, could go anywhere. But gold is the story for gold stays the same. And that essentially depends on how US positions itself in the coming months and years. Uh, a lot of aspects when it comes to the global geopolitical uncertainty and how Indian, US, European, Indian, Chinese economic relationship prospers or falters, right? That's what leads to gold prowess and its weakness. for now, the dollar debasement theory is playing out how it was playing out. However, some cracks in that play as well, right? So, according to Mr. Ray Dalio, dollar should have been replaced uh, a long time ago, and that should have happened, but it hasn't happened yet. And it seems like US is being able to do a few things which might lead to continued strength of dollars in the foreseeable future, like Venezuela, right? It's basically asking India to buy Venezuelan oil. Then, of course, there's other countries that it's looking at, and the relationship with Europe and all. Uh, it's trying to smoothen it out, and so on and so forth. So, if everything sort of turns in that favor, we would not be talking about dollar debasement as strongly as we have been, and that will sort of change things, right? But for now, gold remains a very big hedge, and silver could go anywhere. Speaking of gold, silver, US, uh, we've got to praise ourselves for something. A lot of things happened, as you know. One of the things in the global economy was the introduction of Anthropic's cowork. I'm sure you've heard. Anthropic released cowork, which is like an AI, agentic AI, workforce management kind of a play, right? Tool which manages software development cycles, right? That sent shockwaves across the world. In the tech sector, of course, huge sell off, right? Indian tech sell off also happened. So all the IT companies, they started falling about 6%, 5%, 7%, 4%, and so on and so forth. Now, if you remember, if you've been watching Thinkers Frequency, you would know what these people were saying, the analysts. You remember what they were saying? They were talking about how Indian IT might just be finding its strength again, right? And how it might be wise to invest in Indian IT, right? That's what these people were saying, all the analysts, right? And I had very categorically mentioned that it would be very weird to invest in Indian IT again, because all the systemic risks still exist, and there's gonna be news of different kinds, and some of that is gonna hurt IT, and that's exactly what happened in the last week itself. Cowork happened, Indian IT fell 5 to 7%. Nobody knows what happens from there. So once again, all the analysts at one place, Thinkers Frequency on the other, and Thinkers Frequency wins. Those were all wrong, right? If you would have listened to them and invested in Indian IT, thinking about how it's staging a comeback and so on and so forth, you would have lost money, right? So that's pretty good. That's very well done. Uh, of course, a lot of things happened when it comes to India and US tariff situation. US came out with the good news that it's gonna kill the 50% tariff, replace it with 18%, and a lot of sectors from the country are gonna benefit, which were the net exporters. Now you got to look at the situation. You're gonna step back and evaluate the situation before the tariffs, right? So before 50% tariffs, India had a very favorable kind of a play, right? Then 50% tariffs were announced, which were punitive in action. But those 50% tariffs didn't happen on electronics exports and pharma exports. That was a lot of India's exports to the US anyway, right? But they really hurt gem and jewelry, uh, textile, marine, I mean seafood, and so on and so forth, and other industries, right? So that those industries were really hurt by the US tariffs, and as India was getting hurt because of these tariffs by US, India was looking at diversifying its export pool. India was looking at diversifying its manufacturing pool, setting offshore units. India was looking at credit support to its exporters. India was looking at a lot of things, right? And in that process of finding export diversification happen, making export diversification happen, India also signed the mother of all deals, the EU FTA, right? As the EU FTA happened, India really got a big leg up when it comes to uh, uh, global trade, right? So European markets gave a very, very good deal to India. And the only thing that India had to give to them, which could have been looked at as a risk, was the downward tariffs on European cars, but that too expensive European cars, right? And as we know, Indian market still rests on cars below 20 lakhs. That's where the bulk is, right? But above 20,000 euros is where those cars got some exemption, right? A lot of watches, Swiss watches also got exemption, zero tariffs, and so on and so forth. So luxury goods got exemption, right? After that deal, India had a lot of uh, prospects for growth because that's like a $10 trillion, relationship, a market, and then of course, then US also came together. So we've long talked about how signals play a very important role, right? If you remember, signals, India UK deal wasn't very substantial when it comes to numbers, right? Very small numbers, not a big deal, but it was a signal of where the deal making is going and how it's going, right? India, Australia, India, New Zealand, very small FTAs, not a big deal, but signals, right? And then India, Europe, a very big deal and a very big signal. And as that happened, right, US also sort of came along and is now looking at renewed trade partnerships, which turned out to be a very, very good news, right? Before that, we also had the budget day, and budget essentially, was supposed to bring a lot of good news, and it didn't actually in the market. Now, two reasons why this budget was specifically important for India, right? Number one was a lot of investments. Indian economy is still public capex driven economy. uh, Public capex decides where the country goes as far as development and even the market flow is considered, right? Public capex essentially uh, is critical to many very important, extraordinarily important industries, specifically defense and uh, shipbuilding and so on and so forth. Now, the budget was pretty lackadaisical. I mean, it didn't come out with a lot of revelations. However, it was slightly underwhelming when it comes to uh, defense budget, right? So the defense play only got about 18% of hike, right? Adjusted for inflation, it would be what, 12%. That's no CAGR that we were hoping for. And of course, the capital outlay got some 25%. So, capital outlay is the purchase of new materials, right? New equipment and so on and so forth. So, that got some growth, but not really, not a lot, right? So, defense and what hurt the market. So, as soon as the budget came along, uh, the markets went down, right? The budget essentially had an aspect of raising of the STT. STT is basically, you can consider it like a transaction tax for forex. I'm sorry, for FNO operations, right? And that tax essentially, the government said it was, uh, you know, a way to discourage forex trading and abuse because a lot of people essentially lose money on FNOs. I'm mistakenly calling it forex. It's basically for futures and options, right? So futures and options essentially is a money drain. There are reports that 93% of people lose money on FNO, 98% lose money on FNO, and so on and so forth, and a lot of money, right? So to curtail that kind of abuse, they introduced it, but that sort of markets didn't react favorably to that because that essentially hurts the trading volumes and liquidity and so on and so forth, and that essentially doesn't prove to be a very, very good technique. So budget played a spoiler, but the good news was as soon as the budget came along and it dampened everybody's moods, US deal happened, and it's going to be signed in a couple of months where India gets more leeway. So that was what it was. Mr. Tushar Tiwari says, "You're kind enough to describe the budget this way. Folks in my circle called it a shit show." Well, they must be the future and options trading guys. Mr. Peeyush Sethi says, "Good morning." Right? So that's what happened. And if you look at what's happening with now, let's come to Bitcoin. Did you look at what Bitcoin came to? Right. So let's look at the Bitcoin price. Bitcoin price. Now, Bitcoin price is down to 58 lakh rupees, right? 1 month, 31% down. 6 months, 41% down. Uh, in a year, it's down 32%. So, Bitcoin has really, and it just kept crashing. It just kept crashing. Now, again, this is one of the good things that we have been talking about. A lot of people thought that Bitcoin is a hedge against the fiat system, against the global economy, the formal economy. They called it digital gold. So, if you remember how the conversation around cryptocurrencies have begun, earlier they were cryptocurrency. Earlier they were, a parallel currency, right? Now that didn't work out because that was too volatile, right? Now, after a lot of rigmarole, they came up with the digital gold play. Well, that didn't work out because, it just mirrored the fiat system, fiat economy. In fact, it became a leading indicator of what bad things could happen to the economy, right? So now nobody calls it cryptocurrency, right? They just call it crypto. So the goalposts have been shifting when it comes to Bitcoin. And according to Dr. Burry says that below $50,000, right, the miners will start losing money on Bitcoin. And if it goes there, everything, the whole Bitcoin thing will be out of play, right? That's what he says. MicroStrategy, Saylor, Mr. Michael Saylor, is he? He still says to hodl, but he's looking at a loss of $8 billion dollars on his position on Bitcoin. So he's essentially losing money there, right? It's very weird uh, what has happened. And we always said that Bitcoin is not a hedge against the fiat economy. It is definitely, or if anything, it's basically a leading indicator to what might happen in the future. Uh, Mr. Bhavik Shah writes 59,800 low on Bitcoin. STT should have been abolished since long term capital gains have been reinstated. The government took a measure in the opposite direction, says Mr. Ankur Pandit. Fear and greed index close to 10. Historically, it has been a buy zone. Well, crypto, I've always, I bought crypto back in 2016-17, right? That's when I bought Bitcoin first. But I do not have any faith in its ability to do anything except for some illegal transactions, right? I don't find it useful for any particular thing. So, for all practical purposes, Bitcoin's value rests on how much you will be able to get for it later, right? Uh, it's basically finding a sucker who can just buy it at a better price. It's purely speculative asset. There's absolutely no utility for it, in my view, and that's always been the case. We've been very skeptical of the whole Bitcoin play, but if it's a Ponzi and everybody believes in a Ponzi, it becomes useful, right? Money is Ponzi, right? Barter system is Ponzi, right? Dollar is Ponzi. Everything is Ponzi in that way, right? But if enough people believe in it, Ponzi becomes real, and that's exactly what's happening with Bitcoin. So there goes the play. A lot of companies came out with their earnings. There's an inside scoop I have, folks. You remember we talked about Oyo going public and Oyo making most of the money from outside India, right? Now that they are essentially, what is Oyo? Oyo is operating uh, bought out hotel chains in US and Europe, and running their support centers in India. So it's basically a modern outsourcing company in hospitality, right? It turns out that a consortium of motel owners of Oyo, Motel 6 owners, Motel 6 is the company which Oyo bought in US through leverage, right? They have come together and filed a lawsuit against Oyo for bad treatment, right? That's what's going happening with Oyo. Let's see how that particular thing shapes up. Now, the same consortium, they were in touch with me months ago where they wanted to write wanted me to write something on Oyo and how it's actually, uh, you know, exploiting the motel owners. That's what those people wanted me to write about. I couldn't find time, so I couldn't write it. But now they've come to court. So now it's not just public, private scoop. It's going out in public. Oyo is going to be facing legal rigmarole in US. But Oyo's legal team seems to be working extra time, right? They are putting in a lot of hours. Just yesterday, I got a message from somebody, an Indian business, and they said that Oyo has uh, held on their payments and they've looted them of like 17 lakh rupees, right? So the guys, they showed me their sheets and how Oyo is essentially blocking their money and not paying them and so on and so forth. And now they wanted to fight with Oyo, So that's what's happening as Oyo inches closer to the IPO. A lot of legal matters are piling up, but that's Oyo. That's what they want to do, and it's nothing new, right? They've always been like this. Let's see how they are able to fight this particular tide, right? Mr. Ankur Pandit says Google reported its best quarter ever, and the stock went down 7%. Yes, because of the capex play. So Google essentially classified its expenditures in data center and changed their terminologies, making the Dr. Burry argument valid. So Dr. Burry said that all these investments in GPUs and all, they are being miscounted, right? They're not being counted because a lot of these things have a depreciating value, and they're not making it seem like that. So they're on the books, they're not making money on these purchases, but they're showing. So it was essentially a gap accounting argument that Dr. Burry had put on, and that's working out. So a lot of capex issues with Google, and not just Google. A lot of companies, the whole big tech essentially has gotten a real shakedown as soon as the whole uh, you know Anthropic came out. By the way, Anthropic also came out with an ad campaign against ChatGPT, uh, OpenAI, right? And that went viral. They mocked OpenAI for doing whatever they're doing, putting in ads in the chats and so on and so forth. And that got a response from Mr. Sam Altman, and that's another story. Now let's move on, folks. The current happenings of the day, right? Mr. Abhishek Sharma says Nvidia investment plans also came to a halt. But Nvidia is still looking at investing in OpenAI. Nvidia says it will absolutely participate in OpenAI's $30 billion or $50 billion fundraise. A lot of actions. Palantir went down. So if you look at Dr. Burry's timing, right, this time when he came out with a short on Nvidia and on Palantir, since the highs, it's played out very well. So a lot of people criticized him and they trolled him for being a one hit wonder and so on and so forth. He proved to be extremely prophetic when it came to the whole big tech play, right? So from $207, the stock is down to $171, right? 6 months, the stock is minus 3.6, right? If you look at a year, it's up by 37%, which is like a mature company, but not that great, right? So if you look at Palantir, the Palantir share price is essentially down 24%, 25% 6 months, and from its peak from 200 to 130, that is essentially 210 to 130, right? So about 35%, 35 to 40%, and that's what Palantir is. So his shorts essentially played out, and he was spot on. He was mind blowing, right? So he really nailed it this time and on time. So when he came out, a lot of people, including Chamath Palahipitiya and all, these people said that we are giving him way too much of uh, attention. He's clearly not good at what he does, but he was, and Chamath is nobody. to comment on Dr. Bari's prowess when it comes to these things, right? He was spot on, says Mr. Abhishek Sharma, and Mr. Ankur Pandit says hilarious Super Bowl ad. Yeah, absolutely, the anthropic play. Let's move on, folks. Trump says he won't intervene in the Netflix and Paramount showdown over Warner Brothers. Earlier, Trump was saying that he'll have a lot of say on who wins the Warner Brothers deal. Netflix came out with its bid, and it was great. Earlier, Paramount, which is essentially held by uh, Oracle's founder's son, right? Larry Ellison's son, David Ellison. They were in the fray, but then Netflix came out and scooped it up, and then they came out. So it's a very big corporate battle going on. It was seemingly clear that Donald Trump will be favoring Oracle to take over Warner Brothers because then it'll have like a conservative media leaning to it. But Netflix seems to be doing well because Oracle itself is in trouble. So if you look at Oracle's share price, it's pretty much, it's not doing well. In 6 months, Oracle is down about 47%. 328 to 136. From its highs, Oracle is down about 60%, 65%. So that's not good, right? But that's what's happening. Oracle was amongst the people who have a very big deal with OpenAI. So if they go out, a lot of things happen. And once again, it was related to Dr. Bari's analysis, right? So everything playing out pretty weirdly. But OpenAI is clearly the linchpin. So as Oracle's fortunes wane, Wade, the whole Netflix deal becomes easy to go through. So let's see how that plays. Trump is setting aside. He's not willing to go ahead with the pressure that he was putting in earlier, right? Let's move on. Bank of England hold rates at 3.75. Signals further cuts likely. ECB holds rates steady despite global strains. That is European Central Bank. European countries showed some growth in their economies, right? Germany, Netherlands, and all of those people, they had like a modest 0.5, 1%, and so on and so forth in growth. And they've held the rates. Inflation seems to be in control, and the growth rate is okay. But they don't want to push it too further because inflation has been slightly complicated, and the whole tariff measures and everything. So that's playing out. But Italy, Spain, Germany, all of these countries showed some growth, right? It's of course not as much as India's growth. India is leading there, but some growth. So for now, the rates have been held, right? Let's move on. Very interestingly, as India's currency has been, getting devalued, there's a lot of weird things that are happening. So India's currency went down. India's exports, one of the ways to deal with the tariff situation was perhaps to devalue the currency, right? That's how China won. Now, when Indian currency is down, right, and even if India gives no tariffs to American cars or European cars, or let's say Rolex, right, Rado, and so on and so forth, these people, there's no tariff on duty on Swiss watches anymore, right? Because the currency has devalued, those things still become very expensive, and thus the real competition to Indian markets does not happen. How's that? Right? And that makes you wonder whether India is actually serious about curtailing the currency drawdown, right? It slightly got better, right? And it's gonna get better as more and more FPI and FDI comes to India, which has been on a net level in an exit position for like a couple of years, right? But how is this playing out? So the chief of Rado says uh, the Swiss franc, every trade agreement which reduces tax is positive because the customer will pay for the product and not taxes. But you know the situation of the Swiss franc, it's very strong and the rupee has lost a lot, right? The import tariffs have come down from 22% to zero on Swiss watches, but still, it's gonna be hard for them to sell because Indian currency itself is in the toilet. Right? Quick question: given the trade deals, why doesn't the rupee strengthen? Asks Mr. Abhishek Sharma. So, trade deals are only on paper for now. It takes time for things to implement, right? And the rupee will only strengthen when there's a lot of money coming in, right, from investors outside India, right? That's when, and of course, as I said, some of it seems to be deliberate, the devaluation of it. It seems to be a strategic choice to have devalued the rupee or not, let's say, interfere in rupees fall because it helps the exports. So if your currency is too high, right, your exports become uncompetitive in the markets. When your currency is low, your exports become very competitive. They become cheap, right? The product gets more traction. So let's say if you are a software exporter and you are selling a product, right? And if your currency is too high, right? Uh, it'll be difficult for you to sell, right? And if your currency draws down, right? A US person who's looking at a Chinese product and an Indian product, and he'll see your product. Now you will be making enough money because inflation is down. Things are not very expensive in the country. So you'll be happy because your internal economics, the country's internal economics are pretty solid, right? But it becomes cheaper for him, so you benefit, right? When does the currency drawdown becomes a problem? When inflation starts rising. So why has India not really strengthened the rupee? Is because Indian inflation has been very much in control, very much in control, right? So now they are looking at revising the CPI and so on and so forth, changing the base and everything. But Indian inflation has pretty much been in a very, very good situation, right? And as it has been in control, there the need to solve for the currency drawdown has sort of not been that strong. I hope that answered. Mr. Abhishek Sharma, Mr. Vaibhav Manocha deleted something. Sorry, I couldn't see that. So yeah, that's what's happening, right? Very, very interesting. Makes sense. Thanks. You're welcome. Let's move on. India US may sign formal trade pact by mid March, right? Coming clean may be less taxing. Taxpayers could get away with paying significantly less on unexplained local income. So this is government's amnesty, sort of quasi amnesty move to get back money in the formal economy, a lot of black money, right? So if IT notices are challenged, right, the outgo is 99%. They can seize all your money, right? If you challenge the IT notice and then it comes out that you were wrong. If the notice is uncontested, the burden is 75%. However, if you report it voluntarily that this is what it is, you will be paying 39% of tax. This is a move to get the black money back in the system and be a part of the formal economy. Do you think it's enough incentive for people to turn in their black money? Do you think uh, this is good enough? This will help actual coming back of money to India? Well, you know what? There's a lot of legal long tail when it comes to these things. So a lot of people, even with the quasi amnesty, which was provided after demonetization as well, something like that, it leads to a lot of legal liabilities. And when those legal liabilities surface, uh, it becomes very difficult for people to actually avail such a window, right? And so I don't think it's gonna lead to a lot. But yeah, it's definitely a start, says Mr. Abhishek Sharma, which is the right answer. It's very, very weird though. Like people. uh, India research startup definition to include deep tech companies and cooperatives. India is going heavy on cooperatives. India needs the cooperatives to function. Cooperatives, by the way, are great structures which fight monopolies and help the bottom of the barrel entrepreneurs, the you know smallest small and medium businesses to function very well. Amul is a very good example, probably the best example of cooperative in the world. So that is a bid to boost R&D and D and so on and so forth. Let's move forward. Fashion and jewelry on Instagram menu clicks with Gen Z. Boom in video commerce, particularly for ornaments brands driven by impulse purchases while scrolling reels and feeds. Now, Mr. Sachin Bhatia, who was the co-founder, who was one of the co-founders of Make My Trip, went on to found a company called Bulbul, right? That company was in video commerce. Video commerce, essentially, some aunties from tier 2 talking about a product and then it's selling. Basically, the TV market, TV commerce on video, on mobile, right? So he launched Bulbul and somebody launched SimSim, right? While he launched Bulbul, they raised a lot of money, 30 million seed, and so on and so forth. Didn't work. But the platforms where traffic is, right? That is Instagram. It's starting to show real signs of picking up the video commerce thing, which tells you about how strategically uh, strategic position of businesses matters, right? Let's say Bulbul was trying to create its own platform where video commerce could happen, right? The problem with that idea is that you've got to make a platform which gets all the traction as well. So you've got to get all the customer base to flock to your video platform, which is obviously extremely difficult, right? Very difficult. And that's why Bulbul and SimSim didn't work and they got merged with Good Glam Group, and that essentially entire group tanked, right? So nothing happened with Bulbul. But on Instagram, if there is a business which is looking at helping creators sell better through the video play, right? Video commerce play, that has a better chance of success. So the whole monetization aspect of it, of creator monetization, that really works better. So the business, the idea is the same, right? The paradigm is the same that you're trying to capture. You're trying to capture the idea of people buying as they view videos on these platforms. But the approach is, do you make your own platform and dedicate it to video commerce? Or do you essentially, because then you'll have a lot of control, or do you build something over Instagram? In this case, it's going to be a lower hanging fruit monetization wise, but you won't have any control, and then you won't have any barrier to entry either, because whatever you're doing will be can be done by other people as well. So a lot of things, but this particular paradigm is really kicking in, right? Moving on, folks. Steep single day fall derails silver rally. Gold tumbles too. We've talked about that. Solar equipment makers exports portfolio rises. Solar equipment makers are very happy because of the whole tariff play. We've talked about that, right? Uh, BESS and there are two ways. So when it comes to India's energy system, there's energy generation, there's energy transmission, and then there's energy storage, right? Indian energy storage is really kicking in, and it's becoming very important for India's energy storage infrastructure to grow. Why? Because as renewable energy comes to the fore, like solar, the wind, and so on and so forth, storage becomes very important. Now, there are two ways to store primarily. One is the water way to store, right? You know about that. So it's basically potential energy, right? It's a hydro play. You make water in a reservoir go up, and then whenever that energy is to be harnessed, you open the gates, turns the turbine, you generate energy. And then of course is battery energy storage system. Battery energy storage system is seeing some serious rise. Wari Energies 20 gigawatt battery energy storage by FY28. Vikram Solar 5 gigawatt hour. Satvik Solar 4.8 gigawatt hour. Expected capacity expansion, right? North American market, huge export possibilities. Let's move forward. Airtel, Hero, and Tata Motors came out with their results. A lot of companies came out with their results. Airtel posted a 6,900 crore profit in Q3. Airtel Africa also made a lot of money, right? Airtel Africa was reeling because Nigerian currency had gotten really devalued. It basically halved, right? So that bothered them in the past, but now Airtel Africa has come back strong because of margin expansions. Airtel has done 7,000 crores about net profit. It seems like Airtel is essentially going to be on path of doing that, doubling your money in 3 years. That's what they were planning for, right? So something about 35% of growth every year, CAGR, and that's possible with Airtel, it seems like. So Airtel, while we were hoping to find multi-baggers, right? We wanted to find something that can 10x our money. Airtel will definitely not 10x or even 2x your money, but Airtel will double your money in 3 years, if that's interesting to you. That seems very, very likely. So, 25% year on year play, right? One time provision of 256 crore, new labor codes, that hurt everybody. Hero Motocorp profit up 12%. Tata Motors had a loss 3,400 crores. Why? Because of the JLR cyber attack. You know about that, right? JLR has been dealing with that cyber attack, the whole shutdown thing which came because of that. It made a lot of losses, and that's why Tata Motors had this whole demerger with their commercial thing, because commercial vehicles as a prospect would offer better growth rate for investors. It becomes a better opportunity to raise money and so on and so forth, and that is going to be away from this shit, right? But in the meanwhile, Tata Motors domestic sales have been okay. In the EV play, VinFast is gaining traction, right? Mahindra, Tata, they are doing very well. So Indian automotives are essentially pretty much in the green. They are looking at mid-teens somewhere, their growth. That's awesome. Mobile phones, by the way, are not looking green. They are going to be degrowing. We discussed that, and that sort of seems to be becoming more and more apparent, right? Let's move on, folks. Mega Rafale deal set to get the DAC nod. HAL fell, by the way. The defense stock HAL. It seems to be reeling under the pressure of deliveries. It has a huge order book, 2 lakh crore of order book, but its deliveries are getting delayed. The MK1s and so on and so forth. And that's basically causing a problem. The LCA design, right? They are trying to address the delays in their order book, and I think this is going to be an extended problem with HAL, because it's a different thing to close orders because the government is going heavy on you, but when it comes to making things, that has nothing to do with government initiatives. That's basically engineering prowess, management tightness, and so on and so forth, which a sarkari organization like HAL invariably lacks, right? In the meanwhile, HAL also lost one of the big orders of the prototype, right, for the fifth generation plane that India was trying to make on its own, the proto. They're saying we are okay without it. When it comes to the major project, we're going to go forward, right? But HAL has some good news. So while they lost that 15,000 crore order or something of that sort, how long was that? How big was that order? It was about 50,000 crores. Yeah, I think it was around 50,000 crore, the proto. But they are venturing into the commercial airline play. So they are tying up with Russian SJ-100s, right? To have those planes in Indian market. So they are for now studying it, bringing them, studying the, aspects of serviceability and so on and so forth. And HAL is going well in that regard. So that particular aspect is going to make money for HAL, the commercial aviation, if you can call it that. Speaking of aviation, Air India, uh, the Boeing 787 had another flight which had the same lock issue problem. So they said in that problem, the safety lock essentially went down and it cut the power. Now, if you remember, this is the exactly same problem which happened in the flight which crashed in Ahmedabad, right? The safety went of the power switches, the engine switches went down. In that investigation, they found out that no, Boeing's plane was okay, and there couldn't have been any way where the switches went down by themselves. That's the conclusion that they came out with. But in the flight which didn't crash and found a problem, they actually found that the switches went down by themselves. So, do you trust the investigation which happened and in the Ahmedabad crash case? And do you trust the reading of that investigation? Well, if you do, I've got a bridge to sell you, right? Winfast is still very green, 432 units sold last month. Distribution strength in the name of game. Indian automotive industry, their network is pretty much small, says Mr. Ankur Pandit, and that's very, very correct. However, Winfast has great dreams in the country, right? They want to set cities and so on and so forth. It's almost unbelievable. Let's move on, folks. By the way, this budget didn't really do anything when it came to drones as well, which was very disappointing to me. I thought they're gonna have some special mentions of an emerging technology, but I think this government is not really looking at drone tech that seriously, which is gonna be a big mistake, I think. Let's move on, folks. IDBI is selling stake. Kotak Mahindra Fairfax to come to the fray. IIT PhDs in demand. That's okay. Tainted baby milk hits billionaire clan's powerful dairy empire. So there's the world's biggest dairy company is something called Lactalis Group, right? And Lactalis Group has essentially been growing. I mean, since sixfold in 2 decades, in 20 years, 6x, right? 30 billion euros. That's a lot of money. However, it has a particular compound which is supposed to be sort of an adulterant and harmful to kids, and it came out. And earlier they said it was within permissible limits, and then it came out that it wasn't, and so on and so forth. So they are dealing with and it's a privately owned, elusive family owning a company, huge company, kind of like Subway used to be, right? And now they're facing some problems when it comes to this. Is very similar to what happened with Johnson and Johnson, but the scale of that particular case was just too big. This is not that great. Let's see. Let's find out. Moving on. BlackBerry in early talks with Indian governments to offer government tech for safe communication, right? Of course, this is supposed to be a very big market. Government is concerned about how its communication is essentially going, where it's going. WhatsApp is in fire, of course, is in the line of fire, as it always has been, right? And that's where BlackBerry is looking at coming in. So let's see how that particular thing plays out. For now, Mr. Abhishek Sharma writes, HAL could be a good buy. One question, in budget, were we expecting defense stocks to ride, but it didn't happen as expected? Yes. So we were expecting defense stocks to rise. They should have risen, but they didn't. Especially HAL. I mean, HAL didn't really go far, and then it fell when the news came out that it has lost the proto contract. It's out of the proto contract, right? Proto for the 5th generation aircraft. But HAL is not the only, and I wouldn't recommend, by the way, HAL at the moment, because I believe, as I told you, there are some problems with the company as far as developing its order books is considered. So while it should grow, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of positives that exist for that story. Somehow, there needs to be a lot of good news when it comes to deliveries, right? And when that clears, it's gonna be a good idea to look at the stock. But other stocks like PEL did very well, Masdog did very well, GRSE is doing well, and so on and so forth. So HAL, while HAL fell 6% after the whole play, uh, Masdog and everybody else, these people are okay, right? Shipbuilding, they should be okay. So let's see how that particular play pans out. HAL, I I have lost my faith in that particular story for now, if you ask me. But that doesn't say that it doesn't have positives. It is basically the proxy for Indian defense story, so it should grow, but not really. Let's move on. Indian Oil, Suzlon, Arcelor, Indian Oil and Suzlon, by the way, have great numbers, right? Net numbers went up. Suzlon record deliveries rises 15%. More or less, India Incorporate's numbers have been okay. Now, what does this mean? This means that India's uh, ratings as an investment destination will become better, because what was making Indian equities more expensive was that the earnings were not matching the valuations. Now, because tariffs have gone out, great uncertainty has gone out, and then earnings have more or less given positive signs. This should lead to good outcomes. Let's move on. So in the coming days, what I'm saying is, you should see some money coming in from the FPIs and so on and so forth. Let's move on, folks. NCLT allows 2,500 crore class action lawsuit against Jindal Polyfilms by minority shareholders. This is an important case. Earlier, it was said that it won't be maintainable. It is now. The aspect of this particular case is gonna decide the minority shareholders play in some way. So important. Let's move on, folks. Talked about that. RBI has done a 50,000 crore infusion in the system, liquidity system. We've talked about this. OMO, open market operation. This was supposed to happen and it has happened. The OMO, 50,000 crore OMO, has worked out successfully. Now, Indian banking system, which is supposed to have about 2.5 lakh crores of liquidity surplus, it's where it is. So that's cool, right? Uh, uh, in the meanwhile, rate cuts happened, right? The news is that state debt supply and unclear terminal rate outlook keeps yields elevated. Rate cuts came, but bond yields didn't quite follow the script. Now, why do you think this is the case? That rate cuts happened, but bond yields didn't follow the script. It happened because it takes time for rate cuts to actually implement, because the liquidity of the system, banking system, wasn't as strong. It couldn't, the system didn't have enough times for the rate cuts to actually get implemented, right? And that sort of led the bond yields to not ease that much, right? And that's exactly what they're talking about. So if you look at the numbers, right? In 2020, for instance, yields eased 73 bips against a repo rate cut of 115 bips, right? While in 2019, yields eased 119 bips versus a rate cut of 135 bips. In the 2017 rate cycle, 200 bips rate cut led to a yield ease of 196. So it's correlated, right? Yields ease, that means the bond prices go up when the rates come down. That's the inverse relationship which happens. But in this case, the rates have eased 125 bips, right? But the benchmark yields have barely moved since then. And that's because the liquidity didn't really play out. So sometimes these things take time. Now, what's going to happen is RBI is not going to interfere with the rates for now, right? And then this thing is going to play out. Things take time. It would have been okay if this particular rate cut didn't happen, but since this happened, the banking system got sort of ruffled a little, right? That's the play. Let's move on, folks. Grievances in general health insurance jumped 41%. Rise in claim costs, hospital behavior. That's okay. They are constantly in a tiff. Drug launches can help Cipla overcome US blues, right? It's a lot of things are gonna happen when it comes to pharma. A lot of big patents are going out of life, and let's see how Indian companies manage that particular situation. Railways remains biggest green bond beneficiary with 15,000 crore projects. Projects worth 31,000 crores to be funded mainly via green bonds in FY27. So we said railway stocks are to be watched out. They have the potential to return something around 40-50% in a year and a half, right? And a lot of funding getting mobilized for railways. So let's see how that particular thing pays out. For now, the green bond, sovereign green bond, they are rising for railways, and that's a very, very good news. Let's move on. AI firms help patients by making diagnostics faster and way cheaper, cut diagnostic time and improve outcomes. We've talked about that. AI in medical science really works. Physics Wala has posted a revenue growth. Nykaa has also posted a revenue growth, although Nykaa's margins are not that impressive. That is what's going on today, folks. So let's revise the companies that we've been looking at. We looked at gold as a hedge. We looked at silver for being volatile. We know that railway stocks are important. We know that defense stocks are important, although they are not. It remains to be seen what happens to them. Shipbuilding stocks, in the meanwhile, are very happy, right? We talked about how Airtel can return up to 35 to 40%, right, in a month, in a year, and do that for consecutively 3 years, about 30% growth rate. That's awesome. We talked about how IT was not a good investment, which turned out to be right? We talked about how Bitcoin essentially isn't exactly a hedge against the fiat play. We talked about how dollar debasement could be a bit of an issue if US plans work out. However, there's no guarantee that they will, which makes gold equally valuable. Gold's targets, by the way, have been raised to 6,000 by a lot of banks, right? Tariff situation has opened new doors for a lot of companies that are supposed to be exporting to US. A lot of battery energy storage systems and so on and so forth, solar players and so on. A lot of manufacturing in that way is going to happen. Data centers are raising a lot of money. We've talked about how Indian semiconductor mission is going to be raising a lot of money. Some $70 billion have already poured in as far as data centers are considered in this country, and that figure is only going up. We talked about GCCs and the retail real estate market and the effects of that. 1,800 GCCs exist in the country, hiring about 2.1 million people. That's going to double. We're going to have 4,000 GCCs in a couple of years, or 4 years, by 2030, I guess, and then about 4 million people, which is also an offset against IT, right? Tariffs are going to make that easier as well. Pharmaceuticals is going to be where it is. Automotives is going to be great, right? Because a lot of automotive companies and auto component manufacturing companies were facing the tariffs, so that becomes a problem, right? Critical minerals, the raw materials and so on and so forth, they are going to be very high priority. US has invested about $12 billion to make a project vault. India is going to be doing something similar. US says they'll mobilize about $70 billion to decouple from China when it comes to critical minerals. India is going to be doing something similar. Let's see how that particular thing plays out. For now, India doesn't have the capacity, right? There is a question which I need to answer. Mr. Ankur Pandit says, what's your take on Nike giving Nykaa the operational control for their e-commerce play in India? Well, Nike is in trouble globally, right? So that basically is a good move. They need to do whatever they need to do. Nike is not the brand it used to be, definitely, right? And it is reeling under a lot of problems, and remains to be seen how those problems are dealt with. So let's see. I don't have much insights on how Nykaa will be doing something extraordinary, but it's a wait and watch game. It's good for Nykaa more than it's good for Nike. That's what I'll say. Uh, Mr. Abhishek Sharma says, soon generics will be flooding the market. Weight loss market will be interesting. That's exactly why we also considered Shelly. Right? We do not know how deeply Shelly is involved in the business of syringes, right? For the Vigovi and Monjaro thing, but it should be a good play. However, it's not really uh, like it has picked up 10% in the last few days, but we expect more when it comes to Shelly. So let's see what happens there, right? Satcom is obviously a very interesting market. Mr. Abhishek Sharma also writes, will ETF in these sectors make sense instead of individual stocks? Thoughts? Well, of course, that's usually a risk averse way to go about things, right? If you do not have any conviction on a particular story, on a particular company, you go with the whole sector and then you are hedged, right? Because nobody can be wrong about shipbuilding sector going down. If there's a shipbuilding index, I do not know if there is, right? Defense sector, in a 5 year view, Indian defense should definitely go up, right? Definitely. So that is a hedged, a risk averse way for dealing with the situation. However, if you have a particular insight about some company specifically, it's always good to go with that particular insight, right? But for most people, definitely the ETFs make more sense. What's your yeah, that's what's going on. So agri products, we've talked about that, how India has shielded the agri play. uh, I'm just seeing if I'm missing out on anything. Three Peak XV, that's Sequoia India. So Sequoia India was a US Indian subsidiary of the Sequoia Venture Capital Fund set up in India. They got separate. They went separate ways. They're no longer Sequoia. They renamed themselves as Peak XV, right? Peak 15, I guess. That's what they call it. Now, Peak XV had a bunch of partners, about 12 partners, right? About three of them have ventured out and they're going to start their own venture capital fund. And this is due to how the money was split when it came to Grow's IPO, I guess. That's what the play was. A lot of people read a lot into this. But if you know about things, it's just the usual way of going about things, right? An organization like Peak XV, which is old, mature, and so on and so forth, it's also always going to lead to entrepreneurial VCs setting up their own shop. So it shouldn't be such a big news item. Item, however, is that Fractal Analytics has shrunk its IPO size to about half, right? 2,800 crores, right? 42% decline in the IPO size. Why? They say that India isn't the market. India has less appetite for AI related things. Now, AI related news was the reason why Fractal Analytics came out with an IPO of this sorts, right? It was trying to ride the AI wave. But this is all about timing. Dr. Michael Burry came out with this reading on the AI thing, and then everything started happening around AI. The tech stocks started tumbling, and you don't know what happens the next month or even the next week, right? It's very very complicated. They had to reduce their IPO size by 42%. So this is the kind of shit that happens. Nobody knows. Let's see how the IPO market leads, right? It's very weird. Moving on. Geopolitics, we better not discuss, right? India-China bilateral trade, by the way, has reached $155 billion in 2025. $155 billion is a lot of money. India and US are the largest trading partners. India also has a surplus when it comes to US trade, but India has a great deficit when it comes to the Chinese trade. So if you look at the numbers, $155.6 billion. Exports to China grew by 9%, right? Imports, let me draw the numbers there. The idea is to reduce the deficit, but that's not happening. India is still losing a lot of money when it comes to trade with China. We barely export. They've not mentioned the exports numbers, but I guess we export about 35 to 40 billion dollars to China. India exports to China $15 billion in 2024, and yeah, $20 billion, let's say, even if it rose 10%, $18 billion, and the total trade relationship is $155 billion. So you can do the math, right? We've talked a lot about the budget, chips and all, $100 billion. Textile, jewelry, companies happy. Jewelry is essentially very happy because of the tariff play. They were reeling under an existential threat, which has now been solved for, so they should be happy. Textile found a lot of place. Medical devices, automotive components, right? Talked about banking. The US tariff situation might help the GDP, Indian GDP, by 20 to 30 bips. That's 0.3%. That's exactly what the loss was. So that calculation stays intact. Let's move on. A lot of numbers came out. Right. Data centers, RIETs. Tata and L&T and Bharat Forge in the fray for that 15,000 crore fighter project. We've talked about that. 15,000 crores. That's okay. This week, there was so much of data to sift through. The budget, the tariff, the currency, the metals, the stocks, everything. There was so much of data. It was a very, very heavy week reading wise. So if you've been following, you can give yourself a pat on the back because this wasn't easy. This wasn't easy at all. I mean, for me, I don't know, for you as well, I guess, right? It must have been hard to follow. I'm not sure though. 70 billion to 140 billion. You can ask questions. Tomorrow my product comes out, by the way. My startup. We're gonna be out tomorrow. And that's very, very nice. That's beautiful. And that's why I've been keeping a bit occupied. I've not been able to make the sheet, which I will make, right? But it's gonna be amazing. You're gonna look at it, right? Now, what needs to happen is all the VC funds that they're, creating, and the money needs to come here, right? That's what needs to happen. Nice, congratulations, Nishant, says Mr. Yogendra Pratap Singh. Thank you so much. Much needed. All the luck is much needed. Wishing you all the best. Thank you so much, Mr. Abhishek Sharma. Let's see. We are very, very excited tomorrow. The good news is that we don't open the news. It's somebody else who's using our product. They're going to go public. And with that news, we are going to announce ourselves. So it's better than us announcing, hey, this is what we do. It's somebody who's using the product, who likes it, and who's treating it as their own. And they come out and promote our product as their offering. So that's a big win. And God willing, our product will help a lot of people do a lot of great work. We've designed it that way. So let's see. I'll share it with you tomorrow. Tomorrow morning it comes out, right? We've talked about the markets. I just don't want to miss out on something very important, right? That's why Airtel Africa jumps 24%, 210 million. That's okay. Misho's losses up 13x on logistics network expansion. Misho, obviously, Bajaj profit up. Cred, by the way, did 2,735 crore in revenue, lost 1,500 crore in FY25. Cred has never made money, never come close to making money. It's so weird how the company stands on a promise which is so. It's like they raise so much of money, right, at such a high valuation. All for what? Like, it's just unbelievable, but that's what has happened. So, let's move on. Cred is an anomaly, man. Fiscal deficit 54% of 2026 target. That's good. We've talked a lot about how the government has been careful about its spending, right? So there are fiscal deficit targets which you have to reach, or which you have to make sure that you don't spend too much. So, because at the end of the day, you need to have a fiscal deficit of 4.4%, or let's say 4.3%, whatever, right? Up to 4.4%, and that this government has been able to maintain. Speaking of fiscal deficit and the spending targets, a lot of industries, a lot of ministries which not have been able to spend the money on budget, like sanitation, women and child development, we talked about that, right? They had money earmarked that they couldn't spend. The government is figuring out on how to deal with that situation, because that's a very big embarrassment, right? Very big embarrassment. So let's see how that particular plays out. World Bank is giving up to $10 billion to the country in different schemes, different loans, and so on and so forth. Right? India is a good market to give the loan to. As the French saying goes, always lend to the rich, and India is rich. India is a rich country with poor people, right? Considering the per capita income. But that's what's going on. iPhone, everything. I try to make sure that we don't miss out on anything, and I don't, but still we have some time. 9:41, so we'll just figure out the corner cases. Eurozone inflation rate falls to lowest in more than a year. We've talked about that. Government eyeing 25,000 more GPUs. AI mission fourth tender closes. We've talked a lot about that. It's crazy how everybody in the finance sector was saying that you should load up on IT now that their troubles are bottom up. I mean, you wonder what these people do for a living. I mean, you're supposed to make predictions, and your predictions are supposed to be more accurate than like a guy in pajamas, right? Like, how can you be heavy on IT? So if you look at all the analysts a couple of weeks ago, they were heavy on IT, and I was like, but that has sort of played out very well. Mr. Ankur Pandit says, all the best with your launch. Miss Madhulika Roy Chaudhary says, best of luck. Thank you so much. Much needed. All the luck is much needed. By the way, Bob Iger is stepping off Disney. Bob Iger was the chief of Disney. A lot of work happened around his time, right? Before Bob Iger, Michael Eisner was the chief of Disney, and now Joe DeMaro is going to be the chief. Joe DeMaro is from the theme parks division. Let's see how Disney deals with the whole situation. Legacy of blockbuster franchise deals, China expansion, and scaled streaming business. Right, very important. India's loss widens, but the company is still very bullish on India. Right, the revenue fell 4%, and net loss rose to 1,300 crores. So while revenue fell 4%, losses rose about 10%. That's very weird, but that's what's happening. Let's move on, folks. Shipbuilding schemes to roll out. I'm really bullish on shipbuilding companies, right? India is going to be witnessing shipbuilding like never before. Add Airtel to the target sheet with a 2x target in 3 years. Correct. we should add. I'm thinking, so uh, we need to add. I'll make the sheet today, I'm sure. As we make the sheet today, please add in comments all the companies that we've discussed for our 10x in a year target, right? That was no 5x in a year target. So this all began when a viewer of Thinker's Frequency came forward and said, Nishant, I need help with pairing my debt. I have a debt of 10x and I have 1 lakh in savings and about 1 lakh I can add in a year and I need to get rid of this debt. Now it's our intellectual challenge to solve for this debt, right? Now, what we've got to do is list everything that we know that we believe has the potential to help him pare his debt in a quick way. So please write in comments everything that we've discussed. One is Airtel, of course. We've discussed about Satcom. We've discussed about plastics, the Vigovi thing, Shelly. We've discussed about uh, railways. We've discussed about defense, right? We have talked about Aether. We've been talking about Aether. Aether, by the way, did very well. We've already more than doubled our money on Aether, so that's good. Uh, we've should we also list companies which are not gonna give like more than 30%, 40%? Because there are a lot of companies which are sure to give 15 to 20%, but I don't feel interested in them, right? So I don't talk about them enough. But should we also talk about those companies? Because that's good return, right? Anything above 11% is magical. Anything above 11% is magical because index is supposed to return 11%. But 11% is not going to help him do magic, right? So we're going to think about that. Apollo Tires, by the way, 6,000 crores in capex, Andhra unit expansion. That's very nice. Let's move on, folks. Ankur Pandit, Mr. Ankur Pandit, right? Airtel 2x, that's done. Let's list other companies, please. Let's list all the companies that we've talked about so we can be very sure, right? And people, I'll just copy all that in the list and I'll write the time at which we started talking about these companies, right? And then where they are expected to go. So we'll also write what we expect these companies to do in times to come, right? Airtel definitely 2x in 3 years. Biopharma, textiles, defense. I was like reading the budget and I was like, it has absolutely, I mean, it was very boring, right? But I guess they needed the feeling of continuity in the budget. That's why they went with a boring play because there already is a lot of action happening in the country, right? And they've been on the right track for a very long time. So they probably don't want to rock the boat because if they rock the boat, the second order effects of that could be very weird. We should, if a stock lets you double your return in 3 4 years, we should include them. 3 4 years double, that is like 20%, 25, 30%. 3 4 years, if we include that, then we have a lot of companies. What we were hoping for were the extreme multi-baggers. Like in Aether, what we accomplished was doubling the money within 3.5, 4 months. That has become like a gold standard. If you have a thesis which is so tight, so beautiful, that can actually double your money in 4 months, 6 months, and it's sure to happen, that's awesome. That's just brilliant, right? So uh, let's see if we are being able to add to that. You can keep writing the comments so that the list becomes strong till I search for things I might be missing out on. Rare Earth Corridor, VC companies on firmer ground, long-term backing, that's okay. Semiconductor mission phase 2 outlay to exceed 76,000 crores, we've talked about that. right? The good news is with the 18% tariff, India is going to be better placed than China, Vietnam, and everybody else. Ether will continue to grow strongly. It will turn profitable in the next 2 quarters, and this is without PLIs. Ether will definitely continue to grow. However, it might not be able to double its market cap anymore, right? So Airtel still has the potential to be about, let's say, 50%, 30-40% growth in the next year or so. But it's not a double growth story anymore. It'll take time for it to, uh, you know, for Ether to, it's sort of a mature company now, and it'll be even more mature when it comes to profitability numbers, right? In fact, when it becomes profitable, uh, the its ability to grow might just be under question, because that's when a big stage will have been crossed for Ether. So uh, if you didn't enter Ether until now, it's not going to be a multi-bagger, is what my perception is. However, I'd love to be proven wrong. I'm a very big supporter of those guys. I am really proud of what they've done. So I love the fact, but purely from a trader perspective, if I can say that, now the upside is not as green as it was, of course, right? Because we started tracking Ether back when it was about 300 rupees or something. Now let me check what Ether stock price is. It's 700. In a year, the price is 131 up, right? So it's amazing, right? It's absolutely amazing. Let's move on, folks. Baby formula troubles, we've talked about that. Factory activity has been good. The PMI is up 58, by the way, in Jan. 58. You know about PMI, how to read PMI? Anything above 50 means expansion. Anything below 50 means shrinking, right? Indian factories are really buzzing in right now. PMI rises to 55.4 in January, and the rest of the industry is 58%. So that's pretty awesome. Let's move on. Mr. Abhishek Sharma writes Satcom. The problem is, we have, apart from Airtel, so we are exposed to the Satcom revelation through Airtel, and then there's Nelco, right? But Nelco isn't really doing it. So that's a bit of an issue. If you can find an actual player in the Satcom play, which is directly gonna be benefiting from that, it could be a component manufacturer, it could be somebody who would be implementation play. It's gonna be a 10x kind of a play. It's literally going to be a 10x play in no time, right? So let's see what happens there. By the way, an SSG group is related to the semiconductor play, which could be a good bet. Yeah, let's move on. Yeah, that's good. So yes, folks, we are done. We are done. We're very happy. We've covered everything, which is great. This brings us to the end of the 206th episode of Thinker's Frequency. Our daily mental workout, our weekly mental workout, our weekly dose of insights and analysis, which don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. I hope you had fun, and I hope you learned something. We definitely learned a lot. I learned a lot thanks to you. It's always nice talking. Let me thank Mr. Nishant Aluwalia, Mr. Bhavik Shah, Mr. Ankur Pandit, Miss Madhulika Roy Chaudhary, uh, Mr. Tushar Tiwari, Mr. Peeyush Sethi, Mr. Abhishek Sharma, Mr. Vaibhav Manocha, uh, Mr. Yogendra Pratap Singh, and everybody else who joined. I hope you had fun. Not many jokes today, but a lot of heavy information. Have a beautiful day. I'll see you next week. Please take care. We'll share the sheet today. Mention it in the post as well as the YouTube description, right? And then just add comments. So I'll open it to comment for everybody, and then you can just keep adding comments, and we'll make the sheet much deeper, right? See you. Take care. Bye bye, and have a beautiful week.